co-founder of RACEnergy, Vivekananda Hallekere, co-founder and CEO of Bounce. With us on the show, Hormazd Sorabjee, editor, Autocar India, also speaking with us. And I'm also joined by Abhijeet, Sinha, program director of EoDB and NHEV. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today on the India Development Debate. Vivekananda, let me start by just getting your very basic take of how crucial a battery swapping policy is right now for India.
Hey, thanks, Tamanna. See, battery swapping policy is very crucial, but also what is crucial is what kind of policy comes out, right? While there is a draft policy which has come out from Niti Aayog, it's very generic. It doesn't talk about specifications around battery dimensions, nor the connectors, etc. All of that. And also what we feel is that while swapping standards have to come out, the swapping standard should be very specific to India and not just a copy-paste of something which has worked outside India. And also, we think that one of the main things that government has to keep in mind is it should not make this standardization policies in such a way that everyone has to follow this, which will curtail innovation. And also, I think pilots are hardly done. As you are hearing from your correspondent, the BIS is yet to come out with the battery specification standards as such. What we see is that the consultation is not being done with battery swapping operators as such. So the only worry we have is while battery swapping standard is super important for EV transition to happen, but a standardization which coming in without thinking might actually be 2 or 3 steps backwards as such.
Arun Sreyas, is that a concern that you share? And, very quickly, I think before we go into what the policy needs to have, we should tell our viewers also why battery swapping is so essential. Basically, the downtime that is taken for an electric vehicle to recharge is one of the challenges to wider adoption. Battery swapping essentially means you go to that station and just swap out your old battery or your discharged battery for a new one. It quickens the whole process. Now, with that in place, what are your concerns for how this will actually be rolled out and the time we've taken so far? Arun,
that's correct. And just adding to the point that you mentioned, I think the most important thing is also that the driver or the user is not purchasing the battery upfront. And a lot of times what happens is it brings the price of an electric vehicle, even in certain cases, lower than purchasing your regular IC engine vehicle, right? So that's something that I wanted to add to the biggest advantage of swapping as well. Now, when it comes on to the standardization bit, I think I completely agree with Vivek over here. And I want to probably dive into the technical side of things. Is that standardization, so standardization, again, just to clarify for users, standardization on the side of safety, all these tests that need to be done to be deployed on the field are absolutely required, regarding fire safety or regarding any vibration safety. These are absolutely required, and these absolutely, have to be curated for the Indian ecosystem. That's something that we completely require. But when in general, what people talk about standardization is something linked to interoperability. The fact that you can, sort of interoperably use the batteries across different ecosystems, which kind of what it does is basically restricts innovation, right? This is early days in battery swapping. Companies are just coming out with pilots. We've just launched a few months. Vivek has also launched this recently. And we've got so much to learn about battery swapping. We know it's a great concept. We've tested out with pilots and it works brilliantly. And I think just to sum it up, I would say that by fixing up standards or by fixing up the dimensions of a battery pack, you're forcing all the startups, you're forcing all the innovators in the country to think inside the box and not really outside the box, because every day there's some new technology coming up, every day some new kinds of cells coming up. You cannot really put these cells into the same kind of enclosure, and you cannot make all these same enclosures work together. So there's a lot of technical challenges associated with that. But other than that, I think swapping policy is kind of on the right direction. This is a key thing that needs to be really discussed and shouldn't be forced onto.
Arun, could you elaborate on the point of why you think the policy is forcing the industry to think inside the box? Why do you say that?
Right. So what happens is that, it's a very customer-centric point, which is absolutely, we agree for that. I mean, it's beautiful that, if you have a debit card or a credit card, you can use it across different ATMs. That sounds really great, right? That's a great concept. But this is not a credit card that we're talking about. This is a battery that we're talking about. And a battery is a heart of the vehicle, right? And you cannot just take a heart from one person and just transplant it into other person today, and then hey, it's got some problems. It's run out of energy. Let me put it in some other body, or let me put it in some charging system, get back into the other body, right? And a lot of things. I mean, if I want to take one example, right? While you're defining the enclosure, you can have any chemistry inside the battery. That's not being mandated, and that cannot be mandated because otherwise, as Vivek said, you'll just go back 2-3 steps, and the rate at which new chemistries are coming up, you'll never adopt a newer chemistry. So let's say there's an enclosure defined, and someone's having a lithium ferrous phosphate, LFP as we call it, someone having an NMC battery, someone having a titanium battery, someone having a solid state battery. And a lot of vehicles require more than one battery, right? For a 3-wheeler, 2 batteries, 4 batteries, 6 batteries for a cargo vehicle. And let's assume that, 1 batteries of LFP, 1 batteries of NMC, these will never work together. Even today, like if you have 2 cells of the slightest differences in the same battery pack, they can lead to thermal runaway issues and cause all those fires, right? Imagine having different chemistries, different topologies. I mean, it's crazy amounts of changes that you're asking them to work together. And at the end of the day, it's very true to that analogy of swapping hearts with different people. I can't really undermine like that analogy, and that perfectly applies.
Another analogy that is often used to explain battery swapping simply is the LPG gas cylinder system, which maybe a wider range of viewers will identify with. Your cylinder is over, you go and get another one. Mr. Sinha, how do you make it that easy so that it can be that widely adopted? You're on mute, sir.
And I think we all have been struggling around this question, that first, why this is important, that you have already explained, but how and what are we expected to do out of it is I would be able to outline a bit. And then from there, I think panel is very esteemed and very empowered to take this forward. So I think administrative point of view, there has to be a transparency to the user. And this policy on battery has already confirmed that there will be a unique identification. But the battery which is being manufactured by a manufacturer would have to go through a lot of presses, lot of hands. Also, it will be changing its ownership. So a digital locker would also be required. If from administrative point of view, you are buying a bike, you would not like to disclose your location. So that also need to be curtailed. Your remote access of shutting down your battery should be limited. Otherwise, anybody can shut down without any reason. And not only this, but also discharge. As we know, a discharge can be configured from a different location. So technically, there are 3 points which we need to look into this battery policy: administrative, technical, and regulatory. And all of them are very, very important. If you say technically, and what my co-panelists have been saying, that there has to be an uncompromised chain of data. Otherwise, we will not be able to recall battery before the fire incidents. The OEM and the operator need to have the access information that how battery was behaving last night, last week, last month, what was its heat pattern, whether the cell balancing is proper or not, and that watch need to be there available for any recall or any repair in the balancing. Last but not least, regulatory: value of the battery, insurance of the battery, recycling of the battery, exchange value of the battery, and battery ownership information from RTO or finance. So all these 3-4 parameters are very, very important to be addressed, without which I definitely agree we would not be able to have a comprehensive policy on battery swapping. And Ministry of Road Transport has a very, very clear vision. It's us who have to decide now that whether we want to go with mobile phone. That mobile phone used to have 10 plus type of chargers a few years back, but now we have only 3 chargers, type A, B, and C. So are we going to wait for the industry to take it up itself, or government is going to impose a policy on it? And I think government intent is very clear. They are going to bring it.
Hormazd, great to have you on the show. As always, what would be your breakdown? I mean, we have some details of what happened in this meeting. We know there's possibly going to be a policy in 3 months. What are the biggest challenges right now to the policy?
Well, I completely agree with what Arun and Vivek have said, and quite clearly, not too much to add to that, but just a couple of points. Firstly, we have to understand that the battery is really the secret sauce of the vehicle, of an electric vehicle. That's really what is going to determine in the future success or a lack of success. It's really down to the battery. Now, honestly, standardization, as rightly said, takes the innovation completely out. Because you really have to standardize everything. You have to standardize the chemistry, you have to standardize even the form factor. So what this means is all vehicle designers are also going to have restrictions on design because they can't package a battery the way they want to fit the form factor of the vehicle. They'll have to standardize that as well. So I think that is a serious issue, as far as I'm concerned, because really you're going to have this kind of one size fits all, the lowest common denominator. And really, with EVs, it's all about batteries. You have to push the innovation, in the batteries. That's really what is determining success all over the world today. And we've seen, even countries are taking leads in it. China is going more towards LFP, for example. So certain chemistries also are, being looked at, and jury is still out which one is going to win. So that race is still on. If you standardize that, I think you're not going to be part of that race. I think secondly is liability. Today, when EV has caught fire, you can catch the manufacturer himself. But here in a swappable situation, who is liable? Is it the battery manufacturer? Is it the vehicle, a person with the vehicle, or the vehicle manufacturer, the OEM itself? I think that also is one issue. And to be honest, lastly, looking at the way, especially two-wheelers and even three-wheelers are working in a very kind of, I would say, a confined environment where you're not too far away from a plug. I don't even know if battery swapping is the final answer for adoption, because I'm running an electric two-wheeler. I've got an Ola, and honestly, I don't find any issue with range or plugging and stuff like that. But that could be me. I think it means just making sure that more plugs are available for people to charge. I think that also could be looked into, rather than just forcing, a certain battery down manufacturers and consumers' throats.
I want Vivekananda to respond to that. Do we really need it? Because we started this conversation about how essential battery swapping is. But, right now this policy is for two-wheelers and three-wheelers, essentially. Yeah. And Hormazd has a good point there. If it's so easy to charge, why do I need this?
We have to understand on two-wheeler owners as of now, right? So there are two things which battery swapping solves for. The only way to solve for range today, if you have fixed batteries, by increasing the size of the battery. If you increase the size of the battery, the cost of the vehicle goes up. In battery swapping, what we are doing is we are packing just the right amount of energy. Hormazd was using, say he uses Ola, which packs close to about 3.7 kilowatt hour energy or so, while it is not required, right? So what happens when you try to use only fixed batteries, that everyone will try to pack more and more battery. Today, subsidies also favors those who pack larger batteries, which means that there is going to be a larger constraint on all of these are rare earth resources. So the overall demand for this also goes up. And the biggest point that you have to keep in mind, other than cost, is most of the people in India live in apartments in urban cities. They don't even have parking spaces. When we talk about putting a charging point either in an apartment or anywhere, first thing we have to realize is there is not enough parking spaces. Millions of scooters are parked on the roads. So getting them a charging point is almost impossible. Even in apartments, it's just not about a plug point, right? It's about load. How much load should the apartment now take for, right? Let's take an apartment complex with 1,500 units, right? 1,500 units into how much load should the apartment now take permission for? Then we have to take a transformer there. And imagine this happening in a city, right? Suddenly, everyone is going for an additional load. That is actually not required. So we think for India, particularly for two-wheelers, battery swapping is really good, really important, because it reduces the cost of the vehicle by half. If you want EV transition to happen really in India, cost of the vehicle plays very important role. Second is practicality, right? People should be able to charge easily. Today, that is not very easy. Battery swapping will be like fuel behavior, right? You have the battery. Whenever you run out of energy, like fuel station, you'll go to a battery swapping station, swap it readily, right? So for a country like India, where price is very important, upfront cost is very important, we will actually bring in more people on EV as compared to petrol vehicles very easily with battery swapping policy. So there is no debate on whether battery swapping policy is required. Just that while we are forming this policy, we should not jump the gun on technical specifications. While administrative specifications like Sinha sir mentioned, it is all right and important, fixing liabilities, fixing certain protocols, etc. But the second, if you play around with the connector or even the dimension, right? We were talking about dimension of the battery. A simple thing like what Arun was mentioning was that the battery tech is fast evolving. Let's say we started with NMC. NMC is a particular chemistry which is widely used. There you can pack enough energy in a smaller pack. But the second you move to LFP, you need larger space. So let's say, and LFP is safer also is a known thing, right? Let's say we start with NMC where we were able to pack, let's say government is talking about a dimension,
right,
which is good for NMC and 2 packs. But if the company wants to move to LFP, there is no impossibility of situation to pack so much energy in that much space.
Hormazd, you want to quickly respond?
I think I concede the fact on, the benefits of battery swapping. I'm just saying, just on balance, as, we was talking about the chemistries, I think you are going to curtail the kind of innovation in battery advancement. So, I think that is something one, needs to look at because clearly if, the push isn't there to make the batteries, whether it's cheaper, more energy efficient, that sort of thing, I think we do need that, and I think that in that scenario, you need each one to kind of have his own innovation, his own innovative juices flowing to kind of create the right kind of chemistry or the pack for this. But yes, I definitely agree that charging is an issue, and taking the battery out of the equation would lower the cost, so adoption in that sense would be good. But we are moving very, very rapidly towards a scenario where chemistries are fast evolving and coming to the point on, you don't need a big battery. Frankly, even I realized I don't need all the range, my scooter has. So you can immediately go down to a smaller battery and, possibly if there is more charging infrastructure, that could solve the problem. But, I definitely, do feel that, as, he has said that, for widespread adoption, it would help. But again, the liability issue in terms of safety, all that, whose responsibility is that?
Yeah, no, that's important, the context of what's happening right now with the fires. Yes, Mr. Sinha.
I think government has very, very clearly demonstrated from August 2020 that battery and vehicle both can be separately sold out. If you look at 2021, each state has a different EV policy, but all of them, they have one thing same, that is a swapping policy attached to it, a provision for swapping policy. If you look at 2022, then Finance Minister Ms. Raman very, very clearly said that there would be an EV swapping policy. And if you look at Niti Aayog's very massive and calculative consultation and consensus on people to bring in between, I think within 60 days, we had a draft in our hand. So there is no way going back. What I have understood from the panel and from the industry also, that the concern is more about the size and about one standard. Definitely government is not going to come with one standard. If there is a different type of battery which has different space and there is another type of battery, they will be exchanging with each other, and digitally this matchmaking is very, very much possible. But the concern which has been widely raised is not that serious that it will come in the way of the policy.
Okay. Arun, just, your final comments as we wrap this conversation, because we have to wait and see what the actual final policy looks like. Today was a sort of work in progress kind of a meeting. What are the top 3 pointers that you'd hope to see in the final policy?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Sinha kind of summed it up correctly only. I think first one would be, I think overall umbrella would be just to try kind of transfer the EV subsidies that are generally put out there in whatever whatever fashion, by FAME or by say state subsidies, to kind of transfer to swapping. Now just going in a bit more detail, one would be of course GST. So GST currently when you purchase an EV, it's like 5%. But when you purchase like swappable batteries separately, it's treated as a battery and not a part of the vehicle. So it's kind of becomes like 18%. And given all the innovation and given all the price hikes of today, I think that 13% difference makes a lot of, problems, or kind of tells the whole economics towards the other side, right? That's number one. Number two is, I think, in terms of the FAME subsidies, I think, or any of the state subsidies as well. I think it's very clear when it comes to when it's a fixed battery, vehicle. I think there should be more clarity in terms of how these subsidies can be extended to swappable vehicles with swappable batteries. And also, more importantly, there's also something called as a float in a swapping segment, right? This float is basically the extra batteries that you have that are required to enable that swap to happen. So the subsidy should also be transferred to this float batteries as well, so that it's just a total, from a total cost of ownership point of view, it's better that subsidy is also transferred. And I think third one, I would say just more on a negative kind of a thing is to not, I think as Mr. Sinha said, to sort of have any hard restrictions on the form factor, on the weight, and all of these physical dimensions. Connector also, as Vivek mentioned, right? And just try to keep it more, open to sort of innovation kind of a thing, right? And I think, those 3 points would be great for this swapping.
All right, we'll wait and watch, but it's definitely exciting times. I mean, the pace of EV adoption, even though the absolute numbers are still small, relatively, no doubt, but the pace is showing us that there is an acceptance of this. Now, whether people do it because they care for the environment, whether it's easier, whether it's cheaper, because of high crude prices, we'll have to see. But at the end of the day, it's good news overall. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the lead story this evening on the India Development Debate. Now, an interesting survey